Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And today's voice is currently blowing up on social media. We have Aaron Clark with us. So thank you for your time, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much. Have you done podcasts before, Aaron?
Yeah, actually, since you said he's blowing up, I've done probably like 3 in the past week. It's interesting. I mean, since I made the silly videos, I think people have been rediscovering me, maybe,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know with social media, don't we? And this is where it can sometimes lead to it being a negative place for people, because you end up getting people coming on, and not like yourself, because you talk a lot of truths about bodybuilding, but you get those sort of 5 to 15 seconds to sort of hook someone in. And this is where, of course, there can be a lot of misinformation put out on social media. I'm sure you'll agree.
Oh, tons.
Mm.
Absolutely. Lots of things to sift through. It's great that there's such a wealth of information, because back when I started bodybuilding, there was not really much. I think there was bodybuildingcom and like a couple sites, and the forums were the Wild West back then that people would go on. But now, I mean, if you have a question, there's an answer out there. But the problem is there's probably 20 answers. So, and only a couple of them are good, right?
Yeah, for sure, because a lot of the time it is this first catch on a reel or whatever, and then if that resonates with the consumer, suddenly it's like they're brought into X idea or X theory, and then that, of course, they speak to their peers and everything else. I mean, I'm sure you'll agree from my standpoint, if you're a coach and you're coaching someone, you want them to listen to you like it's gospel, because of course you're coaching them and you know all of the data, compared to someone they may be watching on social media.
Yeah, well, I made a video about that probably last week. It's like too many cooks spoil the broth, right? It's like too many people involved in somebody's journey, whatever we want to call it. I mean, you have to follow one line of information, even if it's not the best information. If you follow it to a T, it'll get you probably where you want to go. But if it's a collection of all this stuff, voices online, you'll be all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also adds to that, in the physique development realm, in an ideal place, we're trying to manage the stress on the physique, but also on the mind. And if you have this conflicting information, it's very hard to sort of manage that in your own mind. If you're thinking, is my coach telling me the right thing, or should I be doing this? And then there is that element of confusion. Now, I have to ask, where did your whiteboard chat start?
Well, I used to be, so I mean, the drawings I use there are super, super simple, right? I mean, but I used to do a lot of cartooning in high school and my teens, I guess some in my early 20s, and kind of something that I fell off of just as I got wrapped up in bodybuilding and stuff. And I guess over the past year, I've been trying to build my engagement and my online. I mean, I have a decent amount of followers, but just kind of, I would only post one kind of thing, right? Like, here I am doing a deadlift, here I am squatting. And it's fine. Like those videos do okay, but it only attracts one type of person, really. And it's not providing any value other than like, look at him lifting the weight, or maybe, Anyway, I made one video on the whiteboard, just kind of like, oh, maybe I'll use this as kind of like a visual. And people really liked it, so I just kept doing it. Yeah.
It's super cool as well, because I feel like you've got that sweet spot of offering education, calling out bullshit, but you're doing it in your own way, so it's authentic. Again, it's something we can get lost with, like, how do I make content? Because do I try and compete with everyone else? Do you find that you're like staying in your own lane, and that helps to not feel like you need to do what everyone else is doing?
I think it's really hard for people to find a thing, right? It's so saturated. And there's so many people being like, this is how you do a lat pull down, or whatever it is, or giving a little tip on diet. And I mean, those videos are good, but there's millions of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, I started just making videos where I would talk to the camera, and they were okay. But again, there's nothing really unique about it. And I think you just have to keep experimenting, right? With different mediums, we'll call it, or different ways to do it. And I think everybody's got some way to do it that's going to suit them and their strengths, or the way, their tone, or how they want to portray themselves. And I think the whiteboard is fun because you can be really, you can talk about serious things, but also with the little cartoons and stuff, like it's kind of light, funny at the same time. So it's kind of a balance between the two.
Yeah, for sure. I really do feel like you have got that sweet spot, and also yours is some of it's longer form, as it were. So rather than that, like you've got 30 seconds, it's like actually, you know, you're teaching the audience something. As my other half has already told you, every morning I hear your voice in the living room. It's like daily fix of Aaron. And for a lot of people, I feel like one of my clients, Elle, she's a big fan of, you're calling out the bullshit, but you're saying it how it is. So you're not trying to sort of name and shame people or get likes, as it were. It feels like it's just you talking about some of the frustrations in the industry. Would you say that that's sort of what your motivation is behind it?
Well, I think that, I mean, motivations is probably not the word I would use, but I do think that one of the things that is a big negative aspect of bodybuilding, fitness, and all that is it's just so much like, you know, like snake oil type of, like, people are selling, they're telling people things with an ulterior motive. And it's kind of sad because people are really trying to better their life, or they're trying to find answers. And so it's something that I really feel strongly about. And, you know, early on when I was competing, you know, you'll take whatever contract you can get, and you're like, I take this. And, you know, there's a point of that, which is cool, but there's also a line, I feel like, where you're just, you know, you're almost leading people down, you know, astray. Not astray, but it's not being honest. And I think that for a lot of people, that's kind of a short-term play, because yeah, you might sell something, but you don't gain the respect of anybody. And I don't know, it's just important to me to just kind of, I don't, it doesn't make me feel good to be that person. And so I would much rather people trust that I'm giving them the real deal, how it really is, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I do feel like certainly there is a bit of a movement in regards to, there are more people sort of actually talking about the things that you talk about.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's super cool, because this is what I feel like we do need. Because I'd imagine for you, and this is often what I have with podcast guests that mention like bodybuilding.com and forums, so you've clearly done this for a number of years, that bodybuilding has gone in a completely different direction, and it's almost unrecognizable to what it was when you would have started out. And I feel like, you know, the OG bodybuilders are like, I don't know where this is going to go. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I think there's a lot of pros and cons, right? But I think really, if you want to boil it all down, it has the potential to be very positive, because before you were really relying on these big media publications, or these, you know, the big boys like the bodybuildingcom, Flex Magazine, Muscular Development, whatever, whoever. And you kind of were waiting for them to give you a voice. And they would be like, just talk about this, you know, they wouldn't talk about this, that, you know. But now the ball's in everyone's court. Like, they have their own media. So I guess the con for a lot of competitors is no one's going to come hand you a check to be in the magazine, at least very rarely. But, you know, you have the opportunity to build kind of your own thing and say what you want. And, you know, some things you say, obviously anything you put on the internet will have some type of consequence, or some type of whatever that is. And if you're okay with that, then do it. But yeah, I mean, it can be exciting, but I also think it depends on your outlook.
Yeah, for sure. And what you're trying to get from the sport, of course, there's a heavy reliance for a pro card or, you know, maybe even top three. And we never really know going into competition. Yes, you know, you're doing your best and you may have even the best physique on the day, but sometimes, you know, depending on who you compete with, what the judges are looking for, there are lots of complexities too, being a subjective sport. And that can then land people in a very difficult position after the show. And what do you then do? You know, ideally it's take judges' feedback and focus and move forward. However, when you've got a lot of people around you saying, did you get the win? Did you get the pro card? It contributes to that stress after the show, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you only have so much control in bodybuilding. And it's a very, I'll say an odd competition, right? Because it's not like you shoot and score or powerlifting, you know, you made the lift or you didn't. It's kind of ambiguous, right? And you only have so much power over it. And it's kind of sad slash scary, the amount that people just keep dumping into it. And I mean, I continue to compete from when I started because I was doing well, you know? And I was like, well, let's see where we can go with it. And that's why I, you know, did, you know, but I didn't knock on that door for 10 years. And I think that bodybuilding has a different place in different people's life, and not to like shoot down people, but sometimes maybe like, you know, you give it a shot. Maybe competing isn't, you know, maybe you're not supposed to take that path all the way to the end, and to be able to accept that, because it's tough. I mean, like we said, there's only so much you can control. I mean, we can only control so much in competing, right?
Mm.
And it's hard to accept that, like, only so many people are going to do really well competing in bodybuilding, and that's okay. Like, maybe there's something else in this field or this industry that is for you, you know, and give it a shot. But just that it's hard, you know, and it's a brutal competition because it's, like you said, it's judged and you can only control so much, and having to accept that, like, you know, you can change so much, and then that's pretty much it, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're, you know, maybe you've come from a background where maybe you were overweight, or this has been like a massive journey for you when you first do a prep. Like, that's the leanest you potentially have been in your whole life, aside from, you know, childhood or whatever. So for you, that could be the biggest achievement of your life, but it might not mean, like you've sort of said there, that it is awarded even a podium finish. But in your mind, it's like, yeah, but I've done all of this. But I always try and sort of get across that most of the people, we can say everyone, or we can say most of the people that stand on stage have all worked hard to get there. So someone has to win, don't they? Which is where it's, have you always won your shows, or have you ever not got that top finish?
Well, I started out as a teen. Um, I did teenage nationals, and that was in 2008. Um, and you made a face like, wow, it's a long time ago. I started training and I had no interest in competing at all. I remember people would show it to me. I was like, that's so weird. Like I don't want to do that. You know, just like the trunks and the oil, and like I was just super turned off to it as like a teenage boy, you know.
Yeah.
And then I think I was looking at the pictures and I was like, you know, I think I could beat those guys. So I did teen nationals, and it's a funny story because I was really trying to figure everything out on my own. I didn't have anyone guiding me, and I ended up looking pretty good, but I did a show to qualify, and the tan part was a nightmare. And so for the teen nationals, I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a tanning salon and I'm going to get a spray tan ahead of time just to cover myself.
Mm.
And so I went to like Hollywood Tans or something, right? And I went in and I was like, what's the darkest tan you have? And they're like, oh, this one, you know, people complain it's too dark. And I was like, that sounds perfect. Give it to me. So they give me this spray tan, and, you know, I'm just a very faint orange color, you know, like I was going to prom or something. And I was like, this is not dark enough. And they're like, oh, don't worry, sweetheart. Like, it'll darken over time. And I was like, okay. And so I went to the show, and of course it didn't really darken. And I was like, oh, like, this is not good. And I tried to buy a tan from the guy spraying people, and he wouldn't sell me one. He said, no, bro, sorry, I don't know if I have enough pro tan. And so I was like, so I just went up there, and I was, I looked like this, and I remember getting off stage, and Dave Palumbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came up to me. He's like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" He was like, "You were going to win the whole show. Why are you like this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know." I was like, "I tried, man." After the morning show, I went, and the guy in the lobby, the tan guy, said, "Oh, bro," he's like, "if I had known you looked like that, I would have tanned you last night." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'll never forget it." Like, what a douchebag thing to say to a teenager,
Yeah.
And then he tanned me, and I got second place to the guy who won the overall in that show, despite all that. So I did pretty good, and everybody's like, "Yeah, you're going to be really good. Like, keep at it."
Mm.
Then shortly after, I tore my pec, and I was like, "I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore." Because I think all through my teen years, I had like really sacrificed a lot, like social life, or like just I was very regimented and like in the gym all the time. And I was like, for what? I'm done with this. So I lost a ton of weight. I think I was probably, 190, and I went down to like 130, like skinny. And, everyone would run into me and be like, wow, what happened to you? And after a while, I just got super depressed, and I was like, I think I'm not done. Like, I have some unfinished business here, and I need to go back. And it wasn't until 2011 that I competed at a regional show. I was like, we'll give this another shot. We'll see what happens. So I did a regional show in Maryland, and I won the heavyweights and the overall just right away. And I was like, all right. And everyone was like, oh man, you need to go to nationals. Like, what are you doing here? Like, and there's always that narrative of like, you need to play the politics and like do junior USAs and then junior nationals. And then, first time at nationals USAs, you're going to try to place here. And then, it's like this long game. And I was like, man, I was like taking classes in college, and I didn't have any money. So I was like, I'm just going to do USAs and just to see what happens. And so I did USAs when I was 23, and I won the heavyweights. And that's interesting in and of itself, because it was probably the most anticlimactic moment of my life, because I did the thing that wasn't supposed to be able to do, and that everyone said, no, you can't do that. Something that was like a wild dream in the back of my head, like just come out and win USAs. And nobody gave a shit. I went home broke. There was no contracts, there was nothing. And I was like, damn, and it's really soul crushing to like, when I was the youngest pro in the world for a few months, and like, so to do that and then be like, what is this? Like, you're looking at the grass on the other side thinking it's so green, you get over there and it's just dirt, and so I competed the next year. I did New York Pro, just out of my own pocket, and I got fourth, which was really good for my first show, and it was good. I wasn't happy with it. I had a super high, probably unrealistic expectations. I think because I had won, it kind of sets this bar in your head that you're going to keep doing that. So I got fourth there. And then, we can go into more of the story aspect of it, but then 2014 was my best year ever. I got third at the Arnold behind Flex Lewis and David Henry. So, you know, both previous Mr. Olympias.
Yeah.
And I won the New York Pro, and then I got top 6 at the Olympia. And then everything fell apart for me after that. I competed a little bit the next year. I think I got 4th at the Arnold, 2nd at the San Antonio Pro. And then I just shit the bed at the Olympia, like terrible. Then I didn't compete again until 2018, and I did awful as I was struggling with like addiction and a lot of things. And I think I didn't really, you know, sometimes you don't realize how bad things are until it slaps you in the face. And other people are like, you're really messed up. That was very, very rattling for me. And I didn't come back. I thought I was like, that's it. Then I came back in 2020 because I wanted to kind of almost for myself, clear my name and like, be like, that's not who I am. And so I did Tampa Pro and I got 4th there, which was pretty good. It was a good showing for me. And then the last show I did was 2021. I did the Tampa Pro again, and it was in the middle of a divorce and stuff. And I just think, you know, I looked okay, but it wasn't as good as the year before.
For sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I always, from the beginning, I was placing high, which is kind of what motivated me to keep pushing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is as well. You mentioned there divorce and not perhaps bringing the best physique, as it were. I had exactly the same thing in a prep, and my coach said to me, if you continue with this prep, we will not be bringing the best physique to stage. And I was fairly close, and he was like, you know, I know you're driven and you still want to do it, but you're not going to bring your best physique. And that's quite hard. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts when you stand on stage and you know you're not bringing the best because of a personal circumstance. I found that very difficult.
It is. Well, I've had it a few times in different forms. Because in 2015, when I came and I did terrible at the Olympia. I was really struggling with, which is a long story, but with, you know, I was addicted to opioids, and I had managed to somehow, that San Antonio Pro, I was like, I'm going to compete. I can still do it. And so I prepped for 2 weeks for this show. And then I pulled like 11 or 12 pounds of water overnight. And I went up on stage and I got 2nd place. And I was upset. I thought I should have won. And it's crazy to think about, because I mean, like it's, you know, what can I expect really? And then people were like, yeah, hang it up. You know, they kind of knew what was going on. They were like, you know, you need to go take care of yourself and you should just cut it at that. And I was like, no, I'm qualified for the Olympia. I'm going to do the Olympia. And I did the Olympia, and then after that, I mean, it was just a cycle of, you know, I went to an outpatient place and they get you off of this and they put you on this. And that ended up becoming something where I had a problem with benzodiazepines and all those types of drugs. And that really spiraled out of control. And then in 2018, I embarrassed myself brutally. Like, I went up there and the internet had a field day with me, just being like, damn, look at him. Like, they made a YouTube video about me, and you know, just on the forums and even in Facebook groups. I remember people who I thought were like my good friends, they were all on there throwing me under the bus. And I was like, whoa, you know, big wake-up call for me. But yeah, I mean, that's hard. It's hard to accept that, especially if you've been able to succeed in the past despite things. To be like, well, this time I can't, you know, that's hard.
It's really hard because, and this is, you know, before we jumped on, one of my strong points with the podcast, it's someone in your position, you know, people would see you on social media, and see heavily muscled male, you've done well in bodybuilding, they don't see the other side to it, because of course, unless you go on a podcast or something, you know, and you share bits on social media. But this is super important for people listening, because there is elements of, you know, the mental health side of this sport as well, but also people struggling in all areas of life. People can really resonate, and it can really inspire people, because when you get thrown under the bus and there's addiction and various other things, it's fucking savage, isn't it, Aaron? Do you know what I mean? It's so
Yeah,
hard.
it's hard to be like, you know, look yourself in the mirror and be like, well, you dug the hole, you know, you gotta do the work, and you know, and what you do after that is up to you. I mean, for me, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but eventually I was like, I have to come back and do better. Even if I don't want to keep coming back and doing it again and again and again, like I have to at least come back and show that that's not who I am. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
For sure. Did you find on the journey from coming away from the addictions, was there certain things that were quite pivotal? Obviously, the mindset of coming back and not being that person that suddenly everyone sees you as. Was there certain things, if anyone's listening, that is in a tricky spot, that really helped you?
I mean, I think it's just being really honest with yourself. Like you look at, and it's really, it boils down to what do you want, you know, and recognizing like these choices make it so I cannot have these things. And if I continue making these choices, I will lose these things in my life.
Mhm.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of people say, well, I'm still going to make these choices. Right. And I think that you have to have a reason to kind of drag yourself through that middle point. Right. And sometimes for a lot of people, that reason is probably hard to find.
Yeah.
But you got to find it. I mean, there's something out there. There's some reason that you were here in the first place. Yeah, you got to find it. You got to find a greater purpose, because without that, then who cares, right? Like, you may
Yeah.
as well just make the choices that make you feel good right now. But
Mm.
you know, that will obviously lead you to a terrible place. So
It's I guess there's elements as well of, like you said, caring about yourself. It's
that's really where it stems from. Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's actually quite difficult for competitors that I speak with, or, you know, clients, when they're doing this extreme sport, they're dieting hard, they're pushing off season, etc. What is self-care? You know, like they don't, it's quite hard to compute what that looks like, because bodybuilding often attracts certain personalities. You know, like you said, your nature when you were getting into it in the early days, it's regiment, it's structure, and you've got a show in mind or what have you. I think that sometimes it's like, what do I do outside of bodybuilding? Do you have any hobbies and things that you do that are sort of self-care, as it were, to take your mind out of it?
Yeah, well, that's a good topic, because I always try to tell people you've got to have other things you love, you know, and just because you have other things you love, it doesn't take away from your bodybuilding. It's probably going to make you better. But all you do is all your emotions and your identity is just invested in this. Like, you know, yeah, you're going to hit an iceberg at some point, and you'll sink. Like, you can't do that. I mean, because there's so many things that can happen, and you can't, like we were saying before, you can't wrap your identity around your placings and competing. That will destroy you. So, I mean, yeah, for myself, I think, yeah, I have some hobbies. And I think that's another thing that after I got divorced, I kind of tried to reignite a lot of those things in my life. And, you know, the drawing and the cartooning is one of them, and playing guitar and other things, you know, and it's really important. It's important to have things in your life that you progress in and that you're excited to do. And bodybuilding is a lifestyle, but you know, so is eating lunch, right? Like, but that's a block of time in the day. I mean, I know bodybuilding is 24 hours a day, but I talk to some people and they're like, no, fuck that. Like, you know, I'm just all in, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. Like, you're missing the point. I'm not saying to not give it your all, but I'm saying that, you know, for your own well-being and mental health, like, you should have other things that you love, because it's very dangerous, and it's to just totally wrap yourself solely in bodybuilding and competing. Yeah.
Mm. Well, like you described after the Olympia, like that cliff you drop off, it's fucking, you know, it's so hard for a lot of people. I know some people that post shows quite a breeze and they feel, you know, pretty good with it regardless of the placing. But I think for a lot of us, if we're pursuing to climb the ranks, as it were, where you've got the pro card and then you need to continue improving, if you don't get that place in, it's really hard. Did you find after that show that you had people around you that supported you, or were you sort of dealing with it on your own?
Well, the reason it fell off was not just the placing. I mean, I was disappointed, but going into that show, the supplement contract I have went broke. So they stopped paying me. Probably a few weeks before, the girl I'd been dating for 5 years and I had a ring for was like, hey, I don't love you anymore. And so there was that, and then, so everything that I had in my life was gone. And I came back home after the Olympia, and, you know, there were no checks. Muscular Development also dropped me. I had a contract with them. And just in that moment, they were like, see ya. And I got kicked out of where I lived. And so I was broke, and I moved into my parents' basement. And I remember just being like,
Fuck.
you know, yeah, it was very, very hard to accept that, because I was literally one of the best in the world that year.
Yeah.
And then it's just a really brutal reality that it doesn't translate to your personal life, and anything can happen. And I think also it's humbling. It's like, you know, things can change like so fast. And, you know, I have a supportive family for sure. Absolutely. But yeah, I felt really alone. Absolutely. And was super depressed. And I remember I sold the engagement ring I had, and I moved to Florida. And that's when I started working with Blackstone Labs company. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying, yeah, it is hard to accept, but that particular situation was really multifaceted. It wasn't about sixth place. It was like, I was like trying to save my life at that show.
For sure.
They gave me for sixth place was, I think, $2,000, which is like laughable, you know, like you spent more than that to go there. So way more.
This is the thing, isn't it? It's I think people that don't know about bodybuilding, they maybe think that we sort of earn money from it, and actually to earn good, you know, enough money, like you say, £2,000 might be getting there, getting your tan and stuff, and that's it. And you really have got to try and find reasons if you can, you know, people that are listening that are on their route in their prep or what have you, trying to find that why within yourself is important, because that does help. Now, obviously, your example is, like you say, multifaceted, but also earlier you said about when you got the pro card, you realized, I'm the same person. And that happened to me. When I won Miss Universe, the next day I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm the same person. It's quite weird, isn't it?
It is weird. I think it's a weird thing that I think a lot of people don't quite understand. If you didn't accomplish some wild thing,
Yeah.
that like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that, but I'm gonna go for it, and you do it. You know, you have in your head like it's gonna be some wild success story, and you wake up and everything's the same. And you know, it doesn't mean that it won't give to you later on in other ways, because it did. But I think just the idea that now we're at another level, you know, it's, well, not quite, not yet, at least, you know.
Yeah. And this is where it can be a bit of a scary sport, as it were, because if you're
Yeah,
throwing everything into it and you maybe not dealing with personal life issues or what have you, and everything becomes bodybuilding, even if you do lift that winning trophy, you're still
yeah,
the same person.
yeah,
It's tricky because, like you say, until you sort of, when you reach that, you maybe didn't think it was possible anyway, and then it's like, whoa. And that's where it is important if people have the support network, the inner circle. And did you,
absolutely.
when you had your friends sort of out you on social media and things like that, did you find it hard to trust in friends again?
I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, it's kind of a complicated answer, but I think that, because I was successful in competing like as a late teen and then through my 20s,
Hmm.
I think it really created a very jaded view of friends because I noticed a lot of people wanted to be my friend because, oh, yeah, he won the USA. He's like, that's my boy. Like, but they didn't give a shit about me. And I think that, I'm honest with myself, and I know that that's a very toxic mindset to have for myself, but it's something that I've had to deal with because I think through my, late teens and 20s, I had a lot of fake friends
Yeah.
and people that, I'm not saying they're bad people, but they wanted to be my friend because in a way, like, just like we want to be somebody's friend that's like killing it, right? Like, yeah, that's my boy, that's my girl. Like,
Yeah.
and it is what it is. It's not necessarily bad, but it makes you really, trying to think of the word. I mean,
Buy into success, that like they feel like they validate themselves almost if you're their friend.
yeah, it's just people want to be a part of something bigger, right? Or like it's kind of almost like you're somebody's friend arm candy,
Yeah.
It's unique, right? It's something different. It's something that not a lot of people are doing and doing well.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that like in my current life, I mean, I have a few friends that are really my good friends, but I have a lot of acquaintances. Um, yeah, yeah, I think bodybuilding has very drastically changed how I look at other people in a lot of ways because I think that, and I don't say that purely negatively because when I started working out in high school, like I was really, really thin. I was probably 110 pounds, right? And so you see how people treat you,
yeah.
and when it's the same you, but you're this, and then you see how people treat you here, when you look different, and then you see how people treat you when you win,
Mm,
and it just and it's just a fact of life. Like it doesn't mean people are bad. It doesn't mean those people are bad people. It's just that we are superficial, and our friends, most most of the time, people who are your friends, like there's some motive they have for being your friend,
yeah.
and it can be hard to sift through that. And that doesn't mean to stay away from all those people, but it's something that to be aware of, right? And I think that bodybuilding made me acutely aware of that.
Yeah, it is certainly, it's like a life lesson, as it were. And I think in your circumstance as well, it's often when you're at the bottom, you see who the true friends are. And people say that, but until it happens, you're like, right, okay, that's what that means. And it is a bitter pill to swallow when, you pour into people and you feel that's there. And then suddenly they're on to the next thing, and maybe you're in the background. And that can be really feel quite intimate, close relationships, can't it?
Yeah, I think too, it's kind of made me um have I guess kind of a toxic outlook on like, because
Mm,
I think as I was saying that in a negative sense, I also had people who wanted to be my friend
yeah.
all the time. And so then, I'm in my 30s now, and it's like things are a little different, right? Like, and I think I didn't learn how to really put effort into friendships.
Yeah.
And I was just dumping all my effort into bodybuilding. And I was nice to people, and I was a decent friend, but I wasn't, pursuing a lot of friendships with other people. And I think that all that is just important to be honest with yourself about, because yeah, I mean, all this stuff affects it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. This is where as well in bodybuilding, I find that people can become very close with their coach. Like maybe they're not an extrovert person and they quite like the bodybuilding because it's fairly solo as an endeavor per se, and
Yeah.
it does attract that type of person a lot of the time, and then that coaching relationship can become very strong in that sense because it almost becomes a friend because you're talking about all what you're doing in your bodybuilding journey, and that can be a really nice thing for if there's people that do struggle to sort of make friends, as it were. It gives that opportunity, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm. So you said you did it on your own at the start, which which a lot of people did, of course, when they're coaching now is obviously a bigger thing, and a lot of people will have coaches. Did you then have a coach as you progressed through?
So I think I was really stubborn. And I think that I would see all these posts of people who had won, and the coach would be taking all the credit. He'd be like, I won, me and my guy won today. And I think that, 22, 23-year-old me was like, that's some bullshit. Like, I'm going to win,
Yeah.
like, it's not like I don't mind giving credit, but I mean, the bodybuilder did it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I think I turned pro by myself. And then after that, I did link up with the guy, Fakri Mubarak, and he helped me a little bit through, I guess, during 2014.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Did that feel like it was any better than doing it yourself, or did you notice?
Well, all right. So let me give you more perspective on it.
Aaron's his own boss.
Well, I was a terrible client.
Okay.
And I think because I knew I could win by myself, and I think that, Faku was really good to me, and he helped me in a lot of ways. And there were a lot of things I didn't listen to.
Yeah.
It's always helpful to have another eye or someone to bounce things off of. When I came back in 2020, I worked with the guy, Johnny Castellana.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know that name or not, but I had actually known Johnny from when I was prepping for USA's. He worked at that gym.
Okay.
I knew him from the past. And so I think there was a little bit of trust there. And I think I was at that point, I was really unsure of myself
Mhm,
and trusting my own like gut,
mhm.
just because it had led me down some dark paths in the, between those years. And
Yeah.
so I, I hired him, and like I followed everything to a T, and it worked out well.
Mm.
I would encourage everyone to follow everything to a T. Like, I think that if I'm giving myself any, I don't know what word to use, like excuse, I think that I just kind of, like I said, I had one
Mhm.
just kind of doing it.
Yeah.
And so if someone told me something that I didn't like, or it was like, I don't think that's how it is,
Yeah.
at that point in my life, I really struggled to trust them.
Yeah.
Um,
There is merit in that as well, though, with what you like. My coach, I'll say that I'll ask questions, and if he's saying do X, and I think maybe from my own experience, it's your physique, isn't it? So it's like if there is something, I think it should be encouraged to be able to have that open relationship as well.
I think so too. And, I get a lot of clients
Mm.
who come to me because they left a coach because they asked questions and the coach would be like, why don't you just shut the fuck up and do it?
Yes.
And just shut them down. And I try to make it clear from the beginning, like, that's not how this is here. Like, I'm working with you.
Yeah.
You aren't like, this isn't some dictatorship. Like, it's your body, it's your journey. Like, I'm here to help you, not be like, shut up and just do what I say. Like, there may be some instances where that may be mildly appropriate, but like for the most part, it's not. And it's crazy. Like it's a super common thing.
Yeah, I know. It's wild.
Yeah. Because look, at the end of the day, like it's your prep, it's your journey. I'm here to help you, give you suggestions. If you're gonna be like, I don't like that, okay, well then let's meet somewhere in the middle, like, and if it doesn't turn out as good as it would have, like, I told you this, right? But I'm not gonna, strangle you into this, doing something. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it is for the consumer as well, a difficult spot to be in. It sounds like you've heard a lot of horror stories, as I call them, and I get it from people listening to episodes like this. They go, "Fucking hell, that's happened to me," and that there's this like authority figure. So the coach is X person, and they're pouring everything into that, and they don't want to put a step out of line. And I've known people that have had like a very bad traumatic personal experience during a prep. And the coach isn't there at all. The coach is like, just do the fucking plan. Like you're saying, it's like, this is a human. This is a person,
Right. It's not, this isn't the Marines or like any type, this is somebody's show that they chose to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I struggle to feel like that's a positive thing at all to act like that to clients, but that's my outlook. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to talk about it on things like podcasts because it is something that comes up a fair amount. You're not alone, Aaron. There's a lot of frustrations from people that do come on the pod and feel this way. But even if I actually did a podcast recently and the guy said, we do what we can. So, ethics in coaching, etc. Treat people like humans. And then hopefully the coaches that do fuck people up and things that do happen, their fate is in, their destiny, their fate is already mapped out, and we've got to stay in our own lane. And I think that's an important message to coaches that listen. When you try and like change a training plan all the time, change the macros all the time because you're worried the client's going to go, and it's like, if things are going well, you don't need to make any changes. Just be a good coach, you stay in your own lane, if you know what I mean.
Yep, I do.
It's like if the coach says you're doing well, we're staying the same. It's like, that's good.
Right. Right. I mean, some people have a notion if they haven't done this for a while that, every week there's going to be changes. And it's like, well, it shouldn't be every week, especially in the off season. Like we shouldn't have to be drastically changing your diet every week. If we do, like that's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. I think as well, like you say, off season, there are elements of if people stay with a coach in that phase as well. But I certainly feel there is that element of keeping the accountability and having that second eye, because you can easily get sloppy in an off season. And, if you're not being accountable, it's like, oh, it's the off season. But for sure, as coaches, we can guide that to make it, I don't like using the word optimal, but to make it as effective as possible per se.
Right.
How do you find going between the phases yourself? I always like to ask guests this question with, in off season, getting bigger, pushing more food, etc., and then going through into prep. Do you have one that you find easier to do, as it were?
Well, I think that it depends on the person's body type a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I started bodybuilding, like I said before, I was very lean and small. And so I never would put on a lot of body fat. And so usually for me, and because I most of the time competed in the 212, I was not trying to put on a ton of size,
Yeah.
right? There was a time and I did it really sloppy. It was not good, but there were a lot of things going on in my life at that time.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think the off season for me would be like train hard, get your food in, but just kind of loosen the reins on everything a little bit and try to live your life. And then when it's time to prep, everything times up. And yeah, that's it. I was never somebody that was super like walking around with fish and broccoli, like all year. I would be out and stuff, and but I always trained super hard. I wouldn't miss any workouts. And I wasn't going crazy, but I don't know, I just think that my suggestion to people is like, I'll have clients to be like, hey, it's date night. Like, can I have a meal? I'm like, yeah, of course, please. Like, unless you're 2 weeks out or something, like, please go have a good date night, like, and I don't know. I mean, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, did you do all your workouts? Did you follow your diet at like 80% of the time? Then go ahead, fuck off and have a great time.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy it. Like, live once,
Mm.
work hard, but like, don't kill yourself for this, because I'll tell you, but it's not worth it. Like, enjoy it,
Mm.
whatever that means for you.
Mm.
And some people, I guess, they can't do that, and they can't stay on like, they have to have more guidance.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Mhm.
But for me, it was always kind of like, stay in it, and my routine would be similar, same workouts, same intensity, but just, I would try to just, like I said, loosen the reins and just try to have some fun.
Yeah, yeah. And do you feel like with then going into preps, have you got an addictive personality? I have.
Yeah, when I got into bodybuilding, I had eating disorders,
Okay.
and then, that kind of was what brought me into bodybuilding. And then, yeah, then later on, drugs, and I tend to be either 0% or 100% kind of person.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for a lot of bodybuilders. And I still hear a lot of them say, well, I don't have an addictive personality, and which is like, okay. But
We're like,
I hear all kinds of things. But yeah, I would say so. My track record proves that I do.
yeah.
So, nowadays I just try to, I make decisions knowing that, right?
Yes. Love that. I love that because this is something I try and work on with clients. Who are you? Like, what are your personality traits? Because as a coach, I'm sure that you'll agree, if you're asking someone to do something, if you've got as much info on how they are as a person, you know how to deliver that. Because as coaches, we are in a position of power, aren't we? You say to someone, do this, you're
Right.
controlling like their whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. Now, is the food disorder something you would talk about? Because this is certainly something that I do have listeners that tune in, and I do have people that do have food disorders. Be
Yeah.
interesting if you're comfortable to talk about it, about transitioning and away from that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, like I said, I was very small, and I think I just had really, really terrible body image,
Yeah.
you know. a lot of self-hate, and a lot of just, I think I was trying to control variables, right? And that's a long rabbit hole to go down. But when I started weight training, I think it was because I was in a place where I was like, I have to do something, because this is, I'm not going to make it very far if I don't.
Yeah.
And when I started weight training, my body changed quickly. And it's very weird, because I think because I was like essentially starving,
Yeah.
my body, as soon as I fed it and trained, was like,
Yeah.
uh, and so that gave me that, and I think that because of that kind of disorder, doing the workouts or doing the things that a lot of people think are difficult in bodybuilding was just regular for me,
Yeah.
right? Because that was just survival, right? Like that was just how my brain worked anyways. So I think that I said this on a podcast just the other week, is like, I'm incredibly fortunate that the thing that I found to kind of grab onto, I happen to be good at, you know,
Yeah.
um, because I think in a way it worked for me.
Mhm.
But I will also say that I don't think I dealt with those like demons
Yeah.
at that time, because I just kind of was like, okay, well, I'll just play on their team, right? And so then, because you haven't really changed your outlook or like worked on those things, they don't go away, they'll come back
Yeah.
in a different way usually.
Mm.
And because I remember when I tore my pec and I slimmed back down, like all those disorder things that came back. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh,
Yeah.
damn.
You thought you'd come away from them, as it were.
Seems like you have, but they're there. And then later on, I think they came back in, the form of drugs. And so, yeah, it's very difficult. And a lot of times when we find something to kind of like a rope to pull ourselves out of a hole, like it's almost an illusion, right? Like there's no way around dealing with those feelings about yourself. And you're going to have to eventually.
Mm.
And it's easier now than in 15 years,
Yeah.
probably, right?
Acknowledgement, isn't it, of who you are, like you say, who you are, and what is it that you're addicted to, or what are those demons. And it's gnarly when you're bringing those demons out, but they do transpire in different areas. Otherwise, like you say, it's a very relevant point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like different seasons of your life,
Yeah.
right? It'll be like different villains for different scenarios, right? But they all kind of are rooted in the same place. Um, of probably just, a lack of self-love and not having a good relationship with yourself.
Mm.
And I think that's a really, really, really common thing in bodybuilding competing.
Yeah.
And the eating disorders and everything is something that I've been around my whole life. My little sister actually passed away in March from anorexia. So I mean, I've grown up just immersed in it. And it's something that I'm so aware of, just in like that bodybuilding competing it's so close to, a disorder. It is really,
It is. It
and
is.
almost rewarding people for that. And it's so dangerous. And I think, like you said before, like you have to know who you are. And some people maybe shouldn't do it. Like if you're close to the edge of that cliff, like it might push you off the edge, and some people don't come back. And that's really sad. I mean, like I said, I've seen it take lives, and it's such a sad thing. And I don't know, I think that like on social media, people see it just portrayed in such a positive way. And it can be. But it's definitely, there's two edges to that sword. Like, it's not just, a lot of these people are very troubled. And I can remember when I did the Arnold the first year, and I had a lineup of, people to see me. And in my head, I was like, this is so messed up. Like, and it's not, but for me, it's like almost like they want to be me, but it's like, you don't know that this is a disorder.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And there's different ways to look at that, right? But it's sort of like, it's the reality of this competing and all that.
It is. I guess, like you say, you've been around it and seeing your little sister, you're gonna have more awareness to the traits and what that looks like. And it's certainly on the peripheral, and it should be for all coaches that are leading people through bodybuilding, and going through, even aside from competing, Aaron. I have clients that I'm working with their relationship with food as a lifestyle client. It doesn't need to be that they're stepping on stage. There's
Right.
still, you're controlling your food, aren't you? And this is where that becomes very upsetting for people like ourselves, to see how people are treated by coaches that are at some sort of sense of inflated ego or whatever, because we know where it can head. Like you say, people die. People can't take it anymore. They end their lives, and it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear about your sister. Of course, it's yeah, it's not something with anything like this. It's in your head. You're the only one that lives that. But even just mention that on the podcast, I do appreciate it, because it's personal, isn't it? And it's something you don't imagine happening, I'm sure.
It's a scary thing, I mean, yeah. I'm just saying that because when I hear people say like certain things, it just triggers like this like thing in me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it could be something simple. Like, I remember there's a girl who goes to the gym where I go, and she was like reverse dieting and putting weight back on. And was like, yeah, I'm really struggling mentally with it, and like that type of thing makes me like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like, no, like it's just, it's sad
yeah,
because you see, I don't know, people who are happy, athletic, work hard, and you see sometimes these things plant seeds in them that you're like, oh no, you know, and sometimes they don't take, but it's dangerous.
yeah. And then there is that, with, like you mentioned, reverse out. If you don't get what you were looking for from a placing, that's when that can be tricky as well. Not just, the mental health side of things, but your body's been through a lot in a prep, and we forget that when we're doing it. Like we've spoken about it, it attracts a certain person. So it's like, yeah, I can do this, and you turn into this, almost, you think you're some sort of superhero, and then that reverse out, the acceptance of weight gain and trying to look to feel better, can be
Right.
quite hard when you felt like shit for a while.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to accept. I mean, especially like you're saying, like if you wrap your identity up in that version of yourself.
Yeah. Do you struggle reversing out yourself, or are you quite good at that transition through?
I think that I appreciate both states, because I never let myself get really fluffy or really out of shape. And when I am in that show state, like I feel so bad and my workouts are so shitty that I don't want to stay there. I can't wait to go back to, just this state where I'm like lean, but like a healthy lean, right? Like, and I think in my head, if I could just bodybuild to that extent for the rest of my life, like that's all I need,
Yeah.
you know? Uh, but like, I think it depends on what you enjoy, and what you've kind of wrapped your, like I said, your identity in, right? Like if your identity is more wrapped in like your ability to train
Mm.
and all that, then it will probably be easier for you to kind of let go of that
Yeah.
show state. But if it's purely just like that look you had, then that might be harder. Um,
Mm.
I think there's a balance to be found there. And it's going to be a little bit different for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. If the love of training is there, you do certainly get to a point in prep where you're like, I'm fed up of being like a bag of shit. And then when you get like maybe 6 to 8 weeks after the show, you're like, oh my God, I can train again. Like, when you go through those stages where initially you're like, I feel better. Then another week goes, I feel better. Then you're like, oh, this is better. And it's like weeks after the show.
Yeah, you're able to perform.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you as well, with the PD side of things, is that something you talk about on your social media and you get people does that bring people's eyes to your page? And have you found a sort of place with that about talking about PD awareness in general and maybe exploring natural potential first and that type of side of the sport?
What do you mean by the exploring the natural potential first?
So with yourself, would you say that it's a recommendation to try bodybuilding first as a lifestyle before you would get into using PEDs, maybe even compete first naturally? Or I mean, I know it's person dependent, but do you try and promote that people would sort of see if they like it first before PEDs?
I think it depends on a lot of things. I think the most important thing is that you have to have the lifestyle aspect in place.
Yeah.
You have to be consistent in the gym. You have to be consistent with the nutrition. You have to be consistent just in the bodybuilding lifestyle,
Mm.
right? Because if you introduce that and the gear all at once, it's kind of like, putting the carriage before the horse, right? Like the gear is only really going to help you if you have the other things in place, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I think, we're all impatient. So people are like, well, let's just go now. And I'm kind of middle of the road. Like when people say, well, I want to just achieve my natural potential first, I'm kind of like, well, what is that?
Yeah, because it's hard to
Right?
determine.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
There's so many variables in your life. And sometimes, not all the time, sometimes when people say that, it's because they want to do the thing, but they're like scared and they're putting it off.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're like, well, I just want to see if I, reach my natural potential first. And then they end up waiting 5 or 10 years and they don't really make any more progress. They just have put it off.
Yeah.
So like, what do you want to do? Right? Like if you really want to compete and do it well in the NPC, well, you're gonna have to take PEDs,
Mhm.
unless you're a freak, and there's a few out there, but not, not a lot. And so I don't tell people out of the gate, guns blazing, like, just dive in, but I think just try to use logic approach to it. And like, what PEDs are you taking? Like, if you're just starting out to see if you like it and you want to do well at a regional show, like, you know, it's not worth loading up on all this trend and destroying the relationships that you have or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like let's think about things. Like what, like, you could get in this and ruin your marriage for a bowling trophy. Like, are you out of your mind? you know, and I understand people want to do it and do it to the 10th degree, but like, you don't even know if you like it. You don't even know if you're going to do it again. And so, you know, it's one thing if you're going to do it and you let, you know, the other people in your life know, like, hey, this is the thing I'm going to do. And like, this might be, but I don't know. I try to make sure people really know what can happen. What kind of choice are you really making? Because, you know, everybody just sees the options and then they see the end result, right? And it's like, well, what's in between there? I'll tell you what's in between, or what could be in between there, and what could be after there, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that a lot more people talk about gear now. Because when I got into bodybuilding, it was very like, don't ask, don't tell. If you talk about gear, like, bye-bye, like everyone will just, you'll be blackballed.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about it, but it's a lot of young, dumb people talking about it. And I'm not saying they're all irresponsible, but maybe they haven't used this stuff long enough to tell you what's really going to happen or what could happen. And just because some 22-year-old, you know, who's single and, you know, living his life, like can take trend and he's like, yo, it's fun. I didn't have everything happen. Like, you know, doesn't mean that John over here, who's married with 3 kids, like is going to take, you know, in a regular 9 to 5. I mean, he might take it and just destroy his life. You don't know. I don't know. And like the mental health aspect, like who knows? Like some people are teetering on the edge as is.
Yeah.
You know, and they might not, you know, some people shouldn't do these things. They're not for everybody.
For sure.
I know friends that took, you know, tren and they ended up in jail.
Yeah.
You know, because they're just inflammatory people. And it just took a little bit, you know, that fuse got cut shorter and, you know, pulling a knife on somebody or, you know, do some crazy shit, you know? And I, I don't know, like, I understand that there's a mentality of like all in. And if that's, you know, you're a grown adult, you're gonna make that decision. But like, understand what that means, right? Because it's not always just we take this, we look good, and we do the show. Like there could be a large asterisk by a lot of those things, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I do. This is where it is that I feel like the natural side of things, it's like at least try and adhere to a diet and train regularly, like you say, before you look at that, because it's an enhancement, isn't it, rather than a band-aid. So it's like, I'll take this to look like this. I don't want to monitor my food or anything. Like I just want that goal. I think that's where the difficulty and the blurred lines can kick in. And I like how you said about the effects that can happen later down the line. Of course, you know, it's different male, female, as it were, but a lot of people take things and they don't know what the risk is and what could happen later down the line. But if we can, as coaches or people in the public space, you know, actually talk about what the effects could be, at least
Right.
if it leads to that informed decision, like you're sort of describing there, it's like, okay, so these things might happen, but for me, it's worth it. And then that's the person making the decision, isn't it?
Right. Yep.
So before we wrap up, Aaron, I want to ask you a question. If you could turn back time to when you were first watching bodybuilding.com and having a look at that before you started bodybuilding, knowing what you know now for many years in the sport, what would you tell your younger self? And we may have already said it today, but it's always quite a nice way to wrap up.
Well, I know a lot of things, and I know people told me them back then, and I didn't listen, so I wouldn't have listened to myself. But you know, I trained for too long.
Yeah.
I do like 2 3 hour workouts, right? Um, now it's maybe 90 minutes, you know, in the morning. Um, Poosh, you never get away with eating like shit.
Yeah.
Even if you don't get fat, like you're still fucking your body up. Like you don't get away with it. That's something that took me a while to kind of really accept. I think a big one for me was when you start using enhancements and performance enhancements, it's like you've got to have a really firm line in the sand, because once you start taking X for Y, right? Well, then why wouldn't I take, you know, B for D, right? Like whatever it might be. And the lines all become blurred. And before you know it, you're taking all kinds of drugs. And I think that for me, because I got in, in my early 20s, and I was very fearless about it, is this attitude like, it's not going to be me. And maybe it won't be, but maybe it will. And there's a lot of things that you need to be careful with. And that's where, like, there's a lot of recreational drug use in bodybuilding and fitness. And I think that a lot of people really justify it because it's part of a protocol. It's part of dealing with side effects from this or that, or pain or whatever. And I think that you need to be really aware of that, And I mean, for me, it started out with like, oh, I can't eat, so I'm going to start smoking weed before I eat, and so I can eat. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, but where does it lead, right? And for me, like, that's a thing that kind of, that turned to this, turned to that, turned to that. And you got to have a firm line, and wherever that is, I think that line's different for everybody, but that can destroy you. And I know for me, that was a big thing. Like, there's difference between supplementation and drug abuse. And not all of us want to admit that, but it is true.
Yeah, it is. I had a guest on earlier in the year, and he said, like, he would never take X compound, and then he tried X compound, and then he would never try X compound, and then he's tried, and then it's like he described it as a gateway drug. So you try one, then you try another one, and you never thought, and then suddenly you're running X amount of PEDs that you sort of swore that you wouldn't, but this can obviously associate to if you climb the ranks. It's like, well, I'll try this for my next prep or what have you. And then you're in this rabbit hole because let's face it, if you're competing year on year or whatever, having phases in between, you're so focused on progression that you quite literally can go, I will do whatever it takes.
Oh,
yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And just, from the side effects, like, oh, this is giving me anxiety, so now I'm going to take Xanax or whatever, like whatever it could be.
Yeah.
And, maybe if you have to do that for a week or two, okay, but like, it becomes a habit, and then becomes a thing, and then maybe it becomes another thing. And it's just such a, if you're under pressure to perform, and like you said, like, you're willing to do anything, you have to be careful. You can't be willing to do anything. Like, you have to have some standard. Otherwise, it's not going to last long.
Yeah, because it like you described there, there's the link. You could be on the Xanax, and then suddenly you need something to bring you around in the morning. So then comes stimulants, or other things. And then suddenly it's like, I need this to go to bed, and I need this to function. And it is super important as well, when we are using compounds, etc., there's those titration doses, and it is person dependent. What someone might run will be completely different to someone else, but it is certainly a rabbit hole to get you through each day and then get to sleep. But yeah, it's an interesting one. When we talk like this, right, I always think, imagine if my mum heard me having this conversation, she'd be thinking, what are you talking about?
Well, my mom knows, she listens to all my stuff, so she's seen everything.
I love that. I love that. I will put your Instagram handle in the description. I know Matt was saying that you've been putting some stories about how nice it is to have people follow you and resonate with your stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very encouraging.
Yeah, for sure.
Making things, They take a while to make. I'm not gonna lie. They're only 2 or 3 minutes.
I know.
But I'm making them every day, and now I'm sitting here. I'm like, man, it takes me like 2 hours to make one of these.
I know. People don't realize how long it takes to make a reel. And you put it out and you're like, it'd be nice to get some likes because that took me 2 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
So guys, if you've listened and you're intrigued, if you don't know who Aaron is, you should. So have a look at the description and give him a follow. He's a real human, which is also very nice on social media. Thank you, Aaron.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Bye.